The sky hadn't changed in days. Same dull crimson glow, same dragging clouds that hung like scars across the heavens. Solon walked beneath them, one foot dragging slightly from the old fracture in his leg. It had never healed properly. The pain didn't matter now, pain was a language he spoke fluently. His crash site was miles behind him. The emergency beacon still blinked on the side of the mangled transport, but he didn't bother staying near it. No one was coming. Not for him. Not after what happened on Belterra station. Not after he broke orders. The ground here was dust and debris, a graveyard of stone and steel, where old civilizations whispered through shattered windows. He moved carefully between collapsed columns and fallen statues, rifle slung across his back. Not loaded. No ammo left. It didn't matter, he hadn't fired a shot in weeks. It was habit, now. The way grief becomes habit. He needed water. Food. Sleep. He needed something alive. And then, as if fate had decided to respond, he heard it. A breath. Short, irregular, too soft to be wind. Solon froze. Scanned the ruins. The sound came again, a dry exhale, the kind that carries pain behind it. He followed it, slow and careful, stepping through a broken archway. The place looked like a temple once. Symbols etched in stone, half-cracked, faded with time. One corner still stood, shadowed and dry. Beneath it, something moved. A shape. Small. Humanoid. He stepped closer, carefully. Didn't want to startle it. She looked up. Alien. Not human. Her skin was soft violet, almost translucent under the film of dust. Her eyes were huge and pale gold, and her lips were cracked. Tangled silver hair framed a face too tired for her years. She wore torn clothes stitched from scraps. Her knees were drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight. She looked like she'd folded herself into the smallest possible version of survival. She didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just stared at him with the hollow, exhausted gaze of someone who no longer feared death. He lowered his pack slowly. Pulled out a sealed ration. Placed it on a flat stone between them. Stepped back. Open palms. Food, he said softly, knowing she wouldn't understand. But his voice was calm. Steady. She stared. Didn't blink. Then, after what felt like forever, she reached forward with trembling fingers. Snatched the packet. Opened it with quick, desperate motions. He watched her eat, tearing into it like an animal, but her eyes never left him. He didn't move. She finished it fast. Didn't thank him. Didn't speak. Just curled back into herself. He sat on a nearby ledge, cross-legged, far enough not to threaten. Took off his helmet. The wind cut at his cheeks, but it helped him stay awake. They didn't speak that night. The sun fell. The ruins darkened. He stayed. She watched him through the broken wall, eyes barely visible behind the dust. At some point she slept. Her body slumped into stillness. He didn't. Morning came like an apology. The light stretched through cracks in the stone, brushing against broken tiles and casting patterns on the walls. She was still there. So was he. He pulled out another packet. Didn't approach her, just placed it on the same stone. Sat again. Waited. This time, she came forward faster. Didn't snatch. She paused near the stone. Looked at him. Then took the food. Went back. Ate slower. Progress. After a while, she stood. Weak legs, thin arms. She limped slightly. Not from injury, from malnutrition. Solon rose too. Moved to a collapsed structure nearby. Began clearing rubble. Not for shelter. Not yet. For purpose. He stacked stones, pried open broken frames. Set up a crude frame with scavenged wood and broken canvas. Didn't ask for help. Didn't expect it. She watched. He built for days. Each morning, the same ritual, food on stone, open palms, quiet gaze. Each evening, the same routine, a fire, small and flickering, fed with dry grass and heat tablets. On the fifth night, she came closer. Didn't join the fire. But she sat nearby. Maybe 5 paces away. Watching it dance. He saw her hands rub together, cold. He removed a thin cloth from his pack. Stood slowly. Walked toward her. She tensed. He stopped. Placed the cloth on a rock. Turned. Walked away. When he glanced back an hour later, it was gone from the stone. And wrapped around her shoulders. He didn't ask her name. She didn't ask his. Names didn't matter here. Gestures did. On the 9th day, she brought something. A fruit, glowing faintly, shaped like a teardrop. Rare. Probably precious to her kind. She placed it on the same stone he'd used. Then stepped back. His breath caught. He approached slowly. Picked it up. Nodded. That was their first trade. No words. No barter. Just an exchange of meaning. Her name, he later learned, was Kaylin. Not from her lips, but from a carved stone pendant she wore beneath her torn clothes. He only saw it once, when she slipped while lifting a plank, and it tumbled free. Kaylin. Etched in a language he couldn't read. He pointed to it. Then to her. Raised his brows. She hesitated. Then nodded. Kaylin, he repeated, testing the sound. It felt like wind through trees. Soft. Sad. She said nothing. But her lips curved, the barest flicker of a smile. He touched his chest. Solon. Her brow furrowed. She tried to mimic it. Zolan. He laughed. The sound startled them both. Close enough, he said. From then on, she called him Zolan. They built slowly. A wall. A roof. Shelter against the wind. She began helping. Quietly. Her hands small, but precise. She mimicked his movements. Learned how to bind joints. How to patch canvas. He never taught her aloud, just showed her. She never asked for instruction, just observed. They moved like dancers. Unspoken rhythm. Unshared breath. Some nights she sat closer to the fire. Some nights he caught her humming. And once, on a moonless night when the cold bit deepest, she reached for his hand. Just once. Didn't hold it. Just brushed her fingers against his palm. It was enough. He learned her patterns. She looked up at the stars before sleep. She whispered into the fire each night, eyes closed. She gathered bones and stacked them near the edge of the ruins. When he asked why, she just pointed to the sky, then placed her hand over her heart. Rituals, maybe. Or memories. He respected them. He had his own. Every night, he looked at a photo. A woman and a little girl, both smiling, frozen in time. Kaylin saw it once. Didn't ask. Just nodded. Understanding pain didn't require translation. On the 15th morning, she brought him something strange, a shard of polished glass. He held it up. It reflected the firelight like a second sun. She pointed to the sunrise. Then to his chest. Then to the glass. He wasn't sure what she meant. But it felt beautiful. So he kept it. Tied it to a string. Wore it around his neck. They never kissed. Not yet. But love grows differently in silence. Not through grand gestures. But in how she brushed dust off his shoulder. How he placed her bowl closest to the fire. How she stitched a patch on his torn sleeve, even though he hadn't noticed the tear. How he built a small shelf beside her bed, so she could place her pendant there at night. Little things. Language without language. On the 20th day, it rained. For the first time. Cold. Violent. He rushed to pull canvas over the shelter. She helped, bare feet slipping in the mud, hair plastered to her face. They worked for hours, soaked. Afterward, she collapsed beside the fire, shivering. He wrapped his arms around her. This time, she didn't pull away. She leaned into him, forehead against his shoulder, hands clutching his jacket. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The fire crackled. The rain softened. And for the first time since he'd fallen from the sky, Solon felt like gravity had brought him somewhere worth staying. Every morning, she woke before the sky shifted. Not because she meant to. Not because she wanted to. But because her body remembered the fear of light. Light meant movement. Light meant being seen. And once, long ago, it had meant being left behind. Now, the light spilled across a cracked stone floor. And in the corner of the shelter they'd built together, walls of broken tiles, stitched canvas, scavenged wood, she sat quietly, watching the man sleep. Solon. No, Zolan, as her tongue called him. His face looked softer in sleep. Less haunted. His breathing slow, like the steady rhythm of waves she'd only seen in dreams. He had scars on his hands. On his chest. On his voice. She could hear it even though she didn't understand his words. But kindness didn't need translation. He had stayed. She didn't know why. Didn't understand why a man from another world would remain in a place of ghosts just to bring food to a stranger. Build walls for a girl with nothing to give. Share warmth with someone who barely looked him in the eye. But he had. And it frightened her. Kaelin remembered the day they left her. Her people, the ones she used to call family, had looked back only once. No, not even that. They hadn't looked at all. The ships rose into the gray sky, humming low, heavy with the weight of survivors. She had screamed then. A cracked, broken scream, thick with fever and dust. But the sound never reached them. She was too small. Too slow. Too sick. They left her in the ruins of their old city, among shattered statues and half-dead gardens, because someone had to be left. And she was the easy choice. The silence afterward was louder than any war. For a long time, Kaelin had spoken only to herself. Quiet songs in her language. Soft names for stones, bones, feathers she collected. Old words. Forgotten meanings. She told stories to shadows. She lit fires from memory. She counted the stars each night, whispering them names so they wouldn't forget her. But they didn't answer. No one answered. Until him. The first time she saw him, she thought he was a ghost. His armor looked melted. His face like it had been carved from pain. But when he looked at her, really looked, something in her chest moved. Not fear. Something else. Something colder. Something that said, "Do not believe this." But he didn't try to touch her. Didn't force her to speak. He just left food. And waited. She remembered the first fruit she gave him. A light berry, rare and bitter, shaped like a teardrop. She'd been saving it for a trade that would never come. But when she saw how he worked, how he built, quietly, like someone fixing his own heart one stone at a time, she brought it to him. Left it on the stone where he left food. It was her first word. A gift is a kind of voice. And he heard it. He had smiled. Not a wide smile. Not a show. Just the kind of smile that warms like fire. Over days, her silence shifted. Not into speech. But into shape. She started mimicking his movements, the way he stacked stones, used tools, bound fibers. Her people had used smooth technology, hovering lifts, self-healing panels, light-borne heat. His tools were primitive. Raw. Made for hands. Made for sweat. And somehow, she liked them better. They made her feel real. Like she was rebuilding something instead of just existing in its remains. Some days, she'd wake and he'd already be outside. Gathering wood. Boiling water. Laying out a plank he had salvaged from a collapsed hall. He had a rhythm. And it soothed her. He never spoke unless it was soft. Never demanded. Never shouted. His language was strange, filled with sharp consonants and round vowels, but she grew to understand the shapes of his meaning. When he handed her a tool, she knew what to do with it. When he pointed at a beam and raised his brows, she knew it needed to be lifted. When he touched his chest after she pressed a healing root to his wound, she knew it meant thank you. Her people never said thank you. They gave orders. Spoke only when necessary. They taught her to obey. And then they taught her she was a mistake. But Zolan never looked at her like a mistake. Not when she dropped something. Not when she froze in the rain. Not even when she accidentally cut her hand and cried out, a sound that startled even herself. He had taken her hand gently. Wrapped it in cloth. Held her gaze until her breath slowed. He didn't scold. He didn't look away. One night, after they'd finished placing the final beam on the shelter's frame, she did something she hadn't done in years. She sang. Just a small note. Soft. Almost accidental. A lullaby her mother used to hum during the dry months, when the air was thick with heat and their garden withered. The moment she realized she'd sung it aloud, she froze. He looked at her. Said nothing. But nodded. Not just like he heard, like he knew what it meant to carry memory in your throat. Later, he showed her a picture. Two humans. A woman with a tired smile. A little girl, eyes too bright to have seen sadness yet. He touched the photo like it was sacred. And Kaelin understood then. He had lost more than a ship. He had lost a world. Just like her. She didn't know what love was supposed to look like. Her people didn't love out loud. But she began to feel it in the way he shared his food even when there wasn't enough. In the way he fixed the roof tighter above her corner than his own. In the way he looked at her, not like she was broken, but like she was still becoming. They built a garden in the ruins. Nothing grew yet. The soil was poor. But she liked touching the earth anyway. Liked pretending something could bloom. He sat beside her sometimes. Not to help. Just to be near. She found herself waiting for him to sit. Not because she needed protection. But because his presence made the silence feel less empty. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the broken towers, she touched his arm. Just once. He turned. She pointed to a bird. Small. Feathered in green and gold. A rare thing here. He looked. Nodded. Then, to her surprise, he reached up and gently tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. Not this time. She just stared at him, heart thudding in a rhythm she didn't know how to name. Later, by the fire, she whispered her first word in his tongue. Thank. It wasn't right. Not quite. But he understood. His hand closed gently over hers. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a thing left behind. She felt seen. In the stillness of the firelight, she watched his eyes close, his breathing steady. She lay beside him, not touching, but close enough to feel his warmth. Her pendant rested near her chest. Her people's language etched into old stone. Tomorrow, she thought, she would teach him how to write his name in it. Tomorrow, she would try saying more than one word. Tomorrow, maybe, she would touch his hand without fear. Maybe tomorrow she'd tell him she didn't want him to leave. Maybe. But for now, under the quiet stars and the broken ceiling they'd rebuilt with bruised palms and borrowed tools, she whispered the name she had never dared say aloud since they left her behind. Kaylin, she said, softly. I am still here. And then she looked at him. Zolan, she whispered next, quieter. You are, too. And the fire between them didn't flicker. It burned steady. Like something meant to last. Storms didn't always come with clouds. Sometimes they wore faces. Sometimes they arrived not with thunder, but with silence and loaded rifles. Ella stood at the edge of the ruins, dust caking her boots, fingers curled around the grip of her pulse pistol. The air here was wrong. Too still. Too clean. Someone had been cooking. Someone had been staying warm. Someone had hope. She hated that smell. Movement, came the growl of Tharn, her second. She didn't answer. Just stared through cracked glass into the old village. Her eyes scanned broken rooftops, sagging walls, faded murals half-eaten by time. She'd seen places like this before, old colony cities, emptied after the fall. Nothing left but bones and ghosts. But this one. This one had firewood stacked in a neat pile. A water basin cleaned of grime. And someone had swept the dirt outside a low shelter's door. Ella's had grown up around scavengers. No one swept. No one planted flowers in shoes left on steps. No one left fruit on a stone slab unless they were too soft in the head. But someone here had done all of that. Someone who still believed in living. And that made them vulnerable. There were 6 of them in her crew. Well, 5 now. One had been buried in a canyon 2 moons ago, cut down by an unstable trap. Ellis hadn't cried. You don't cry for people who'd sell you for one more breath. She hadn't chosen this life. Just woke up one day, 10 years old and sold to a raider ship for a box of protein powder. You learn quickly in chains. You learn how to keep your head low, your hand quick, your voice silent. And you learn never to care. Caring gets you killed. But she wasn't 10 anymore. And she wasn't a slave. She was leader now. And yet. Something about this place made her hesitate. Tharn grunted. You're wasting time. If someone's here, we take what we need and go. It's not like they'll stop us. He spat on the stone and adjusted his shock blade. Ellis looked down at her own weapon. She had earned it. Not by force, but by surviving. Every nick on the barrel told a story. She didn't want to write a new one here. Not yet. Move slow, she ordered. No killing unless you have to. If someone's here, we don't scare them. We talk first. Tharn rolled his eyes. Since when do you play nice? Since I started leading, she said, and stepped over the threshold of the ruins. The village wasn't just alive. It was lived in. She saw it in the footprints. In the smoothed stones around a fire pit. In the half-built wall clearly done by hand. And then, just ahead, 2 figures. She froze. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a rifle slung lazily across his back. His face was sunburnt, jaw lined with a few days' growth. And beside him, a girl. Not human. Slim. Strange-colored skin. Silver hair braided down her back. They were building something together. Not watching the world. Not hiding. Just, working. Quietly. Ellis blinked. She had never seen 2 people look at each other like that. Not with fear. With trust. She almost stepped back. Almost turned away. But Tharn moved forward. Too loud. The man, the one with the rifle, turned, fast, scanning the shadows. His eyes locked on them instantly. The girl stepped behind him, but not out of fear. Just readiness. Like this had happened before. Contact, Tharn barked. No, Ella said quickly, but it was too late. He raised his weapon. And the man responded, fast, efficient. Rifle up, trigger half squeezed. No sound. Just the shared breath between violence and survival. Ella stepped forward, hands raised. We're not here to fight. The man didn't lower his gun. The girl didn't move. Ellis tried again. Just passing through. Still nothing. It could have ended there. Should have, maybe. But then one of her own, Gars, the idiot, lunged forward, hoping to flank the girl. And the storm truly began. The first shot came from the man. Not fired. Deliberate. It hit the ground near Gars's feet. A warning. But Gars panicked. Fired wildly. Ellis shouted. Stand down. The ruins erupted in chaos. Dust. Shouting. Shadows. Smoke. Ellis ducked behind a broken pillar, fury in her veins. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't the damn plan. She watched through a cracked wall as the alien girl moved. Fast. Smart. Slipping through alleyways like wind. Throwing rocks, distracting, disappearing. The man fought like a soldier. Precise. Quiet. Brutal. Not a fighter for glory. A fighter to protect. She saw it in how his eyes never left the girl. Not once. Ellis should have called retreat. Should have run. But she didn't. She kept watching. And something inside her cracked. She didn't remember running. Just the moment when Tharn raised his blade behind the girl. And she moved. Without thinking. Without orders. Without fear. She slammed into Tharn's side. He roared, stunned, turned to face her. What? No, she said. She's not ours to take. What the hell are you? She didn't let him finish. One shot. Not fatal. But enough to put him down. Her crew scattered. And Ella stood there, pulse pistol shaking in her hand. The girl stared at her. The man raised his rifle, then paused. He looked at Ellis, then at Tharn, then at the blood on the ground. He understood. She wasn't the enemy. Not anymore. They let her stay. Just one night. Long enough to tend to her cut. Long enough to share a fire. Long enough to watch how the girl, Kaylin, the man finally said, brewed something warm from strange herbs and handed it to her without fear. Ellis didn't speak much that night. She didn't know how. How to ask, how do you look at each other like that? How to say, I want what you have. How to whisper, I never had a home. When she left the next morning, she didn't look back. But in her pocket, Kaylin had placed something. A scrap of cloth, stitched with strange symbols. A goodbye. A thank you. A thread of hope. She carried it with her for years. Never told a soul. And when people asked her later, when the war ended and the maps were redrawn and she was just another name in a new world, if she ever saw love out there in the wastes, she'd nod. And say only. Once. Solon didn't know what made him wake that night. The fire was down to embers. The shelter creaked under wind, soft but persistent. Kaylin was still beside him, curled under the blanket she'd stitched from scavenged cloth and the inner lining of his flight suit. He sat up slowly. The dreams were always worse when it rained. And it had rained. Again. Third time that week. The smell of wet dust made the crash feel closer. The memory of the scream, the one he couldn't stop replaying, curled against his ribs. But tonight was different. Tonight, the weight on his chest didn't crush him. Kaylin had started humming in her sleep. A sound like breath and water and something older than either of them. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just watched her in the low orange light, hand resting open on the dirt floor, her hair spread across her cheek in tangled ribbons. How had this happened? How had a man who once woke to the sound of alarms and orders now found peace in the quiet rhythm of a girl's breath beside a fire? It had started after the raid. After the scavengers ran, leaving only wreckage and tension in the air. Ellis had disappeared at first light, quiet, no words. She left behind a scarf, folded and left by the door. Kaylin had picked it up. Held it for a long moment. Then burned it. Not out of anger. Just to mark the end of something. The past had its rituals. And so did healing. In the weeks that followed, they built slower. Not out of fear. But because the walls were already standing. Now they were adding layers. Kaylin brought symbols. Painted them on the inside of the shelter with pigment pressed from berries and dust. Spirals. Lines. Constellations. Old language. Solon didn't ask what they meant. He knew better now. Some things were sacred. Some things were shared only when the heart was ready. But one day, she handed him a stick of the pigment. Gestured to the wall. Then to him. You, she said softly. Draw. He hesitated. Then knelt. He drew the only thing that had ever made sense to him, a mountain beneath a sky. His daughter used to draw them, always with birds. He added one, tiny and bright. Kaylin watched him. And for the first time, she reached out and touched his drawing. Her finger traced the bird. Then pointed to herself. He blinked. Then nodded. Yes. She was part of this now. They started sleeping closer. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that the space between their hands felt deliberate. He'd open his eyes at night and see her silhouette, starlight through the roof slats outlining her cheeks, her lips. He'd close his eyes again quickly. Afraid that looking longer would change everything. One morning, she placed a hand over his as he held the pot above the fire. Just rested it there. Not for help. Not for instruction. Just contact. He didn't move. Didn't speak. He let the warmth of her skin seep through the calluses on his palm. It stayed with him long after the pot was removed from the flame. They talked more now. Small words. Broken grammar. But meaning lived in the pauses, the shared looks, the hands that moved with precision and memory. He taught her new words every night. Sky. Soft. Stay. She'd repeat them, imperfect, musical. Then teach him hers. Words that sounded like wine through reeds. Oh. The moment between laughter and tears. Naka. The space left behind when someone walks away. Sien. Warmth that doesn't come from fire. They wrote them on bark. Etched them into stone. Built a language between the ruins. One night, when the sky was clear and the wind didn't howl, they lay beneath a tarp near the garden. She rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, his arm curled around her. Her breath hitched. He thought maybe she would pull away. Instead, she shifted closer. Not a single word. But everything changed. The next morning, she kissed him. Not in the firelight. Not during silence. In the sun. While they were planting. He was pressing a seed into the soil, brow furrowed, hands dirty. She leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his cheek. He froze. His breath caught. But when he turned to look at her, she didn't pull back. She kissed him again. Softer. On the mouth. Just once. Then stepped away. Waited. He stood slowly. Stepped forward. And kissed her back. They didn't talk about it. They didn't need to. They moved differently now. She lingered near him when he cooked. He ran his fingers through her hair when she sat beside him, head against his chest. She traced circles into his palm when the nights turned colder. Love, he realized, was not about noise. It was about choice. And they were choosing, every day. On the 7th morning after their kiss, he heard the ping. Small. Metallic. Unmistakable. His beacon. It had taken weeks, months maybe. The days blended. But someone had picked it up. A signal echoed through the communicator like a whisper through time. Rescue inbound. Landing within 7 rotations. He stared at it. Held it in his palm. Then looked at her. She was kneeling by the garden. Planting something. Slow. Focused. He didn't tell her right away. That night, she knew. She always knew before he spoke. He showed her the signal. Held it out. She didn't touch it. She just looked at him. Then looked away. You go, she said. A statement, not a question. He shook his head. Not without you. Her eyes flinched. Not at his promise. At the fear that he might mean it. Your world is not mine, she whispered. This is our world, he replied. They didn't sleep that night. Not because of the signal. Because neither of them knew what it meant to leave without losing something. In the morning, she showed him a vine. Planted weeks ago. Already curling up a piece of rusted rebar. Your seed, she said. He knelt. Touched the sprout. It was pale green. Tiny. But alive. What is it? He asked. Hope, she said. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Hands buried in her hair, her palms pressed flat to his chest. She didn't pull away. Not now. Not ever. The next 7 days passed like fire. They packed slowly. Chose carefully. Some things would be left. Most things. But not her. He wasn't leaving without her. She didn't know what the stars beyond the sky looked like. But she would see them. With him. On the morning the ship arrived, he held her hand as the wind from its engines scattered dust across the ruins. She looked back once, at the walls they built. The fire pit. The garden. Then looked at him. Ready? He asked. She nodded. Then whispered something he didn't understand. But the way she smiled afterward. He understood that. Perfectly.